Nākamā runātāja būs Bula. Un viņa mums pastāstīs par to, kā ir mums veicies un attīstījusies monumentālās glezniecības restaurācija pagājušā gadsimta nogalē, ja tā varētu teikt. Lūdzu.
Kurš šis ir tas nākamais, ja? Ar ko es varu? Yeah? Okay, we'll try. Dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I have the honor to be here today between you professionals, professional restorers, and give a little introduction in restoration history in Latvia. So, in my presentation, you can enjoy. There will be no difficulties, no problems, just a brief historical overview. Restoration has one of the most important roles in passing on history, culture, and identity. And as a consequence, it is important to find out and understand how the choice of the conceptual framework and methodology has changed over the years. Equally important in restoration would be to highlight the factor of individual personality, bearing in mind that the origins of professional restoration in Latvia can be considered in 1950s. This was the time when, through bypassing the approaches and priorities generated by system under the framework of political ideology, the nucleus of scientifically based activities for restoration of cultural historical treasures was born. Yes. The development of restoration as a separate field was taking place rapidly in Europe at that time. Several documents were created, political documents were created, which determined the political framework, defined conservation and restoration, which were of great importance for the practical work of restorer. Of course, for developing a common restoration or renewal concept for items and to prescribe the further work methodology. And, you know, in terms of USSR period in Latvia, there were no conservation term. Practically, it was called like restoration. Meanwhile, in the second half of the 20th century, it was not possible to obtain a restoration profession or some academic education in this field in Latvia. For a long time, there was just a master and a student relationship, where the master would provide the full range of knowledge. If potentials could be seen in their students, combining this, of course, with immediate application and practice. Practically up until the 1970s, the restoration of museums items was considered the priority and like also professional practice. This could be partly explained by the professional activities of Ādolfs Kazaravickis, professional restorer, and his personal authority on the restoration of Latvian museum items. Ādolfs Kazaravickis continued the renewal of paintings in museum collection, which began in the 19th century, transforming this into professional restoration. That time, in the Ministry of Culture of Latvian Soviet time, gained its methodology from the USSR leading schools. The Latvian restorers could do in-service training, of course, and also Russian workshops. Restoration of rooms at Rundāla Palace were the main challenge in the restoration concept for items, which was gradually developed from 1974. And also was the preservation of authenticity, also encompassing scientifically based activities. Also, difficulties raised with the sacred places, as you can see in my pictures. During the USSR period, the relationship between the state and church was not so clear like today. In sacred buildings which continued to provide their initial function, like praying rooms, broad restoration works generally did not take place. On the one hand, this can be looked very negatively, but on the other hand, there was no interference in the interiors. And the original substance was retained. For example, Augstkalnes Mežmuižas Church, also Apriti Lutheran Church, Pasien, and so on. Government financing for undertaking restoration and renewal work could also be allocated to cultural heritage items of state importance. And consequently, restoration and repair work took place at the largest and most important buildings, like also I mentioned before, Rundāla Palace. In the 1972, and the restoration of interior of Mežotne Palace in 1970. So basically, it was the first scientific restoration place in Latvia. Around the same time, the renewal of other culturally, historically valuable items also began. For example, the object in Riga and Mazā Pils Street 17, where right now is located the National Heritage Board of Latvia, the main Riga St. Peter's Church, Dome Cathedral, where Ronalds is working, and so on and so on. And here I would like to mention all representatives of monumental painting restoration and that time, who is on a great honor in nowadays. So it is Imants Lansmans, Ieva Lansman, Jānis Bokmans, Eduards Roze, Osvalds Iskalnis, Kārlis Vilīts, Staņislavs Astičs, Kristīna Širvīnska, Juris Spilners, Anita Šaitere, Iveta Muižniece, Inese Mežikaķe, and others. And they're, based on their love of history, were able to renew historical monumental paintings at many sacred and lay buildings in Latvia. In 1918, the following were the main methodological principles for scientific restoration, which has to be observed for the subsequent restoration items during USSR period in Latvia. First of all, the object of scientific restoration had to be original and authentic. As a consequence, the scientific restoration task was not to renew original parts or lost substance, but rather to preserve the original itself as much as possible. The second one, the restorer is not an objective and neutral mediator between historical artistic treasure and contemporary perception. The restorer will inescapably add artistic expression to the item. So basically, we can change how this, we can feel how the second one point change in nowadays. And the third one, the restoration process has several levels. For example, the technological, semantically communicative, and the artistically aesthetic. With the changes in political system in 1990s, changes also in common restoration approaches in Latvia. And it was very inert changes, but still proceeded. In the first decade of 21st century, specialists had to increasingly follow developments in Europe. as countries in the post-Soviet spaces, for example, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Estonia, Czechia, desired changes not just in materials used, but also the selection of the restoration concept. The perception of terms change also. Authenticity, conservation, restoration, reconstruction, and other terms change their previous meaning. One of the most striking at that time, and also contradictorily evaluated cases of renewal of interior decorative finish was the renewal of interior of Agloana Basilica. However, this, what you can see in my pictures, cannot be considered as restoration or not even reconstruction in the literal meaning of these terms. This is an author's work, a new interior, which obviously shows the tendency of passing time, conditions dictated by a customer, and the demand for unconditional obedience. Ignoring that fact that art treasures could be irreversible, lost in that way. But the restorer found a way of including the presence of restoration in the creative work. Historical polychrome painting fragments were conserved and restored, exhibiting these in the interior of the basilica, what you also can see nowadays. So the specific case highlighted an important problem in the changing times. Should the interior finish in all buildings where losses are more than 50% be conserved and left for coming generations in only a fragmented way? Or also the second one, how great should be the influence of the local community in the choice of the restoration and renewal concept? If the choice on whether a building will continue to perform its initial function depends on them, like its sacred places. Maybe you're still facing these questions, or maybe you also already dealt with them. Anyway, I wish you, for all of you, very pleasant and gainful these 3 days, and thank you very much.